Welcome patrons. It's been way too long since the last Nations video, so let's get this back on track. I counted the comments when I sat down to write the script, and it was a tie between Orlais and Antiva. So this week, let's focus on Antiva, and next week we'll break out the masks. Also, for those unfamiliar with the games, we have yet to actually see Antiva as a player, so any and all background shots you're about to see are sadly not the country I'm going to be talking about, but rather a mix of Orlais and Ferelden. Anyway, get ready for the smell of rich leather and the threat of crows. Welcome, patrons, to Antiva. History. The earliest record of Antiva we have is actually from an armor set in Dragon Age 2 that is a part of the item packs that no one bought. The armor is called Baragran the Bold and tells the story of a dwarf with the same name. The basis of the story is that Baragran was thrown out of the dwarven city of Gundar around -45 Ancient, about 30 years before the dwarven Tig was actually destroyed by Darkspawn. He eventually found his way to what would one day be Antiva and taught the humans there dwarven smithing secrets. He also used these secrets to help build the would-be Antivans, a giant naval force. As much as Antiva's power is focused on its trading navy, you may consider Antiva to actually be founded by this dwarf, as it became a nation about 15 years after Baragran was exiled. I should say that a lot of these dates were guesswork here, so they might actually be proven wrong eventually, but this is the best we got. But the nation of Antiva as we know it started out as the small city-state of Antiva. Although it's not reported that the teeny-tiny Antiva was ever part of the Free Marches, they did join forces with a collection of city-states when they were all being threatened by Starkhaven to make one giant Starkhaven. As today Starkhaven is still a teeny-tiny city-state, we know that Antiva and its allies were successful. The beginning of the nation we know today started out with a bunch of pirates figuring out that they could make money in safer ways on land. They ended up settling on Rialto Bay, which they later found to belong to the city-state of Antiva. Eventually, the two groups formed an uneasy alliance and would later join forces to become the nation we know today. Antiva was mostly a small, lesser thought of nation until the Black Age, when its current King Alonso Campana World of Thedas Volume 1 says this guy's name is Dario, while DAI codexes say his name is Alonso. At this point, I'm just going to go with Alonso because I like it better. Anyway, he married the daughter of a wealthy merchant, Queen Asha Subraya Baradur Ghana of Aisley. At this time, King Alonso was known to be a weak man, and his marriage to Asha was a move from the merchants to strengthen Antiva's position in Thedas. Now, Queen Asha was from Ravane, a society run by matriarchs, and it's common in Ravani culture to secure alliance through marriage. As she was also known as a skilled tactician, she would take this idea to the next level. Over her lifespan, Asha was able to wed her children and grandchildren into royal and noble families across Thedas. Some of you may ask, what did that even accomplish? This now meant that a majority of the world powers were related to one another, and that they all had a common matriarch, the Queen of Antiva. Antiva was now home to the mother of many powerful and wealthy families. The blood of Queen Asha is said to run in the Empress of Orlais, the Prince of Starkhaven, the King of Navarra, many dukes in the Anderfells, and even a few Tevinter Magisters. Eventually, though, disaster struck. 512 Exalted, the Fourth Flight began, hitting a large part of Antiva and killing the entire ruling family. At this point, you may be wondering if this undid all of Queen Asha's hard work. It did not. The Darkspawn did not kill the entire bloodline, just one small part of the family. The kings of Antiva have been unbroken for quite some time. Anyway, during this blight, much of Antiva was destroyed, and 12 years after it began, the archdemon Andorral was slain, freeing the nation of Antiva. The nation did well to rebuild what they had lost, but the nation is not exactly known for its luck. The second disaster to befall on the nation is smaller compared to the rest, but in 599 Exalted, the current Queen Madrigal went on a hunt deep into the forest. She is then found with 4 swords pierced into her chest. This action and image so bothered the divine at the time that inspired the naming of the next age, the Steel Age. Her death is still largely believed to be a mystery. Some believe that the Guild of Assassins named to Antiva, called the Crows, had something to do with it. Others believe that a mysterious group called the Executors had a hand in her death. Some still believe that the Antivan Witch of the Wild is what brought the queen to her untimely demise. Only 30 years after the death of their queen, the third disaster strikes. The Qunari invade and eventually conquer Antiva. It stayed under Qunari control for almost 100 years before being freed. Well, freed for less than 20 years and then recaptured again during a lost battle during one of the Exalted Marches. Antiva would stay under Qunari forces for almost 30 years before much of Thedas, minus Tevinter, and the Qunari signed the Lomarin Accord, when they agreed on an uneasy truce and Antiva was finally freed. And Antiva begins to build what was once again lost. And then, about 100 years later, dragons, who were once thought to be extinct, reappears in Antiva. Although they largely move over to Orlais and Novara and much of the destruction is concentrated in those areas, we now know that the reappearance of dragons is thanks to the Antivan Witch of the Wilds, Yavanna, who have been slowly hatching and taking care of the beasts to bring them back. Also, at the beginning of the Dragon Age, we know that Antiva suffered a civil war, which was deemed the Three Queen Era, and this is literally all we know about this event. Geography. Because we have not actually been to Antiva as players, I'm not really going to end up talking about as much geography here as I did with Ferelden. Not much is said about the terrain of Antiva other than Josephine describing the settled areas as being lush and Zevran saying that it's warm, rainy, and the flowers are always in bloom. We know that there are swamps, something called the Drylands, which I'm going to assume is a desert, but I don't really know. We have mountains all the way at the top and a good amount of coastline, and a small river. For the most part, all of Antiva's major cities are all port cities along the Rialto Bay, as this is where the nation makes most of its money. Antiva City is the nation's capital. Rialto is where the pirates originally settled. The Silent Grove is not actually on the map, so I don't know where it is exactly, but this is where Yavanna lives, and is known as a sanctuary for dragons. This is said to lie somewhere within the Telari Swamps, which, again, is not on the map. The White Spire, not to be confused with the Mage Circle of the same name, this is just a mountain range, and I really only wanted to point it out to give you an idea of how much land is supposed to belong to Antiva. Politics. Antiva is a plutocracy, which if you haven't taken a basic government class, or like me if you've had a shitty basic government class, means that it's a form of government controlled by the wealthy. As mentioned earlier, Antiva does have a long line of kings that have been unbroken for some time, but they are not really in control of the country. In fact, the Antivan monarchy doesn't even have a strong army. The true power in Antiva is divided amongst merchant princes. These merchants are not actually princes, but rather heads of various businesses with their own personal army, and each is locked in a war with the other princes for dominance over the nation. Besides the blood of Queen Asha, Antiva is also safe from invasion due to the House of Crows, a league of assassins that are considered the most skilled in their deadly trade and hired by all across Thedas. Their reputation of being able to assassinate even the highest of nobles is enough to keep other countries at bay. But that isn't all. Along with the kings, the merchant princes, the House of Crows, there is another power nestled in Antiva's political workings. Remember the pirates that helped form the nation? They are now called the Felicita Armada and are considered the leading navy for the nation. Although they were always part of Antiva, they really only started to gain major influence after the Exalted March when they were a major player in getting rid of the Canari. The Armada is so feared from merchants that these merchants will often pay them to not steal their cargo. As a nation, Antiva is known to be politically neutral, which also helps with its trading practices. Culture. The culture in Antiva is said to be strongly based on the real-world cultures of Italy and Spain, with Zevran and a few other Antivan characters even dropping Spanish words. Although I don't really know anything about the Spanish language, I know enough that there is a difference between Mexican Spanish and Spain Spanish, and I'm curious to know of what the game is using, so comment below if you know if they lean towards one way or the other, or if you can't really tell. Either way, the Antivan we have heard seems to have a Spanish accent. Josephine also talks about Antiva a lot in Dragon Age Inquisition. When speaking to her, she explains that Antiva is very focused on its family, and most noble houses are run by one elder family member, usually a parent or an elder sibling. Or if the elder sibling isn't doing a good job, the family selects a new member. Religion. The nation is largely chantry-based, and Antiva devoted itself to Andraste and 145 Divine after Divine visited the area. However, they are not a particularly pious nation. It is most evident in their celebration of various festivals. The Thedas holiday of Saturnalia, think of a weird mix of Mardi Gras and a hint of Christmas, is particularly loved in Antiva, with celebrations lasting over a week and celebrated with giant wild parties, masks, and naming the town fool as ruler of the day. Dress. So long story short, we don't know, but we can assume some things. Both Josephine and Zevran are from Antiva, and both enjoy a finer quality of life. Also looking at how richly Josephine dresses, it can be assumed that Antiva is more similar to Orlais in fashion, preferring more form over function. Another thing to note is that Antivan women are looked to be more pure and delicate in Antivan society, which explains Josephine, and they are generally not allowed in combat. This probably leads to women in Antivan culture to be more dressed up than the men, as well as not revealing a lot of skin, as to keep that pure look. On the other hand, Antiva is also described as being a place of romance, so I would imagine that some clothing actually has a flirty ring to it as well, which, yes, you try to imagine clothing that is both flirty and pure. Food. Again, there's not much here, but there is plenty of talk of Antivan alcohol. Much of the Antivan trade actually comes from its wine and vineyards. One of the bottles you can find in Dragon Age Inquisition is the Antivan Sip Sip. You can give Zevran a rare Antivan brandy for plus 50 friendship points. Is there a name for this? Whatever. Relationship with other races. Elves. Much of what we know about elves in Antiva is from Zevran. Zevran describes that the city elves in Antiva are similar to other elves in Thedas, a life of poverty in the alienage. It should also be noted that Zevran's mother found it hard to support herself after she left her Dalish clan, and she had to become a sex worker to survive. Zevran also mentions that the Dalish clans around Antiva are much more violent than other clans around Thedas. Dwarves. Other than early Antivans being helped out by a dwarven exile, not much is known about the relationship between dwarves and Antiva. As both are heavily trading-based economies, and most nations try to buddy up with the dwarves for Illyrium, one would assume that they do have a positive relationship, though. Qunari. Despite its violent history with the Qunari, not much is said about Antivan's thoughts on the Qunari. While one would assume that Antiva has strong negative opinions on the Qun and its people, that's not always the case, as seen with Ravane. Although I would assume that most of Antivans rich and powerful are anti-Qunari, there might still be some quiet pro-Qun commoners amongst the Antivan people. And that, dear patrons, is all that we know on the nation of Antiva. I know Orlais is highly anticipated, so expect that next week. Also, as I promised a few weeks ago, stay tuned to another lore video coming out soon to make up for last week. My goal is to get it out today, but that doesn't happen tomorrow for sure. Do you still have lingering questions, proof that I'm wrong? Comments about your own fan theory. Feel free to tweet me at @Gilderthalon on Twitter or send a PM to user Gillanon on Reddit. Daresh Shiral.